Adam Savage here in my cave answering questions from tested patrons. And the first question here says, from Robert Standen, asks, Adam, when you need a collaborator for a new project and you don't have an acquaintance with that skill set, how do you go about finding someone to work with you? That is a tricky question. And I can't say that I have a method. So straight up front, I'm going to talk about this as a theoretical. Because it's not like I go and look for projects to necessarily just do and then figure out all the parts I need to get them done. I mean, certainly that happens, but it's also sort of like a confluence of many different things. Like a collaborator will show up that's kind of the perfect collaborator for the idea that I've been percolating for a couple of years, and then I get to bring those things together. But I think there's another way of answering your question, and it has to do with what makes an ideal collaborator, in my opinion. So I'm going to answer that question because I do have a point of view on that. First off, for a collaborator is a willingness to see what happens on camera through the project. And obviously that's my brand. It's kind of like, well, let's see how we get, let's see where we go. That's my living. But not everyone is comfortable with that. And I have run into makers who, they haven't said it outright, but I can tell they're deeply, potentially uncomfortable with the abstract idea of being vulnerable on camera. Not just being vulnerable on camera, but actually like embarking on a project that might not lead us where we think it's going to go. Or just the idea of being, there is some exposure here, right? That's always a potential. And it's not like, we're going to edit anything to make anyone look like an idiot. I mean, except for the natural dumbness I can bring to a project sometimes. I'm not being down on myself. I'm just saying, we all have our failings, and like part of COVID has been me sort of letting those show up in more ways than I have in the past. So an ideal collaborator is someone who's totally willing to kind of cut loose like that. I'm always interested in people who are interested in more than just their own discipline. Yeah, on Mythbusters, we ran into an interesting problem with collaborators when we would bring in experts. We often found that people who had a total expertise in the field we were asking about were often not as good as someone with less institutional knowledge than they had, but more of a broad base of understanding. That broad base of understanding, well, to give you some perspective, years ago, I had an informational interview with IDEO. I reached out to them between gigs in the early aughts and said, I don't know if you guys are hiring, but even if you're not, I'd love to just talk to one of your supervisors about the kind of people you do hire, just to figure out if that would be a place I'd be interested in working. And they were like, yeah, absolutely. This was a great piece of advice given to me years ago by somebody who said, don't ever call for an interview, call for an informational interview. I don't know if that would still work, but it worked gangbusters in this case. And I got on the phone with a couple of IDEO senior folks, and one of them told me that they had a really specific corporate philosophy of looking for what they called mushroom-shaped people. And that is people with a really solid foundation. That's the stem of the mushroom, but a wide range of interests. That's the crown of the mushroom. And I mean, she was singing my tune when she was telling me that anecdote, because that's exactly the kind of people I most like working with. I think that's about it. I mean, that's really what I look for in a collaborator. A willingness to let the project go where it's going to go, and a wide range of interests. I think it's as broad as that. It doesn't have to get more specific. I also have lots of people I would love to collaborate with in the future. Friends of mine who are makers. Makers that I admire. Yes, I see your comments. I'd love to do something with this old Tony. Alex Steele, sure, completely. ClickSpring, yes. Primitive Technologies, totally. Ted Woodford Guitars. I mean, every one of these people is someone I would love to collaborate with. But I also recognize that the project upon which we end up deciding to collaborate is is going to be really specific to each of those individual creators. Laura Kampf showed up in my cave with a fully formed idea for a collaboration, and I loved just fulfilling the task that she set out: how to open a bottle using a hammer. That's great. Yeah, I think that's a reasonable answer to your question. Thank you so much for that great question. And tested members, tested patrons, please keep submitting your questions, and I will continue to answer them. Thanks, guys. See you next time.